Hello and welcome to this video. We have the great privilege to have Parry Chan onto the channel to talk about his experience applying to the University of Waterloo for mechanical engineering. Parry is a second-year student at the University of Waterloo studying mechanical engineering, and today he's going to be sharing his tips and tricks for getting into a top university in Canada. Parry, how are you?
I'm good, Josh. How are you?
I'm doing well, thank you. So let's get started off with some quick-fire questions for the audience to get to know you and your background a bit more. So Parry, where are you from?
I'm from Hong Kong.
What high school did you go to?
Harrow International School, Hong Kong.
What subjects did you do for your A-levels?
Physics, chemistry, maths, and further maths.
How many societies were you part of in high school?
I would say 2, with one that's STEM related.
Do you need to be academically gifted to get into the University of Waterloo?
I would say so.
Describe the mechanical engineering interview at Waterloo with 3 words.
It's rigorous, thought-provoking.
So describe the feeling of getting into the University of Waterloo with 1 word.
Relieving.
Brilliant. So now that we've understood a bit more about your background, let's get right into some longer questions about your application process. So perhaps from your own experience, what were some of those extracurricular activities that you've done in relation to mechanical engineering?
I think the extracurricular activities that's really made me stood out is that I did summer internships when I was in high school. So as Waterloo has they have a really famous co-op like placement program. My applicant background aligns really well with the school's program in general. So they saw that I actually have work experience in engineering. So they're like, oh, this guy did some placement before, and so they really like my profile, so they accepted me. I think that's a really important activity that I did out of school that really made me stood out. And I think for anyone who hopes to get into any top institution, they should be doing high school. They should be doing internships in high school to stand themselves out from a normal high school applicant, because nowadays you can't get a good job without a good internship. You can't get into a good university without internships. So I think nowadays internships mean a lot to everyone.
Can you perhaps tell us a bit more about your internships? Like what type of internships were they, and what were some of the things which went through your mind when you were trying to choose your internships? Because I assume a lot of high school students who are applying to those extremely competitive universities like the University of Waterloo are thinking about, well, okay, how can I go the extra step further? How can I stand out? What parts of my internships can make me a competitive kind of candidate? So what are some things that you were thinking about when you were choosing your internships?
I think it's to make it relevant to what you're actually doing. So for my internship, I was working in a solar engineering company. So the company basically is like a consulting company, and they help people to plan the solar panels that they have on their houses. And then we will do some design related work to help them like make a floor plan for the solar panels and everything. So that was a really good experience for me to get a good insight into engineering and to confirm that I actually like engineering, and engineering is what I expected it is. So yeah, I think having an internship that aligns with what the degree you're applying to is really important, because or else there wouldn't be much use. But if you have nothing else, it's better than nothing, I would say.
So that's a good step into some of the extracurricular activities that you can do for your application. What are some other kind of extracurricular activities that you've done which perhaps are not related strictly to mechanical engineering?
I'm a Boy Scout myself. I've been um, going to Boy Scouts since I was 12, and I have achieved some really highly awarded roles in Boy Scout, which kind of gave me the experience of communicating with people, and also time management, people management, and just how to run an organization. Because at one point, I was leading maybe like 6 other 60 new members, 60 members in Scouts. So I think this really helped me in terms of like clearly communicating with people. Um, One thing I found in Waterloo is that um, a lot of people, even though they don't have internships, they have some really cool side projects. Um, so when I saw some projects of the newcomers this year who are year ones in Waterloo, I found out that the side projects they did, like the robots they did in high school, are probably like better than like some fourth year projects at some other universities. So the fact that like if you go into a school that's really emphasized on technology and engineering, having a really cool side project can really demonstrate that you're a really good candidate.
Brilliant. That seems like a very interesting thing. So now perhaps some people might be thinking about, okay, there's projects, there's internships, maybe there's some things on the side that you can do. But perhaps what if someone might be from a different background and they might not have access to as many internships or these side projects? I was wondering whether you have any perhaps extra activities that you can suggest that someone takes part of in their application process. What are some other extracurricular activities that they can do?
So what the kind of side project that I did was that it was during COVID, so I made like a toilet flush sanitizer. So it was a device that dispenses uh, sterilizing fluid when the toilet's being flushed. So it can like I described it in a really impactful way. So um, I think that was a really good start for me to have a project. Um, However, my project, I would admit that my project was a lot less significant than my other friends, my classmates at Waterloo, because they have some really cool projects. They made like a robotic arm for themselves, coded all the electrical components and everything, which is really cool and impressive. So if you are interested in engineering, I think having an internship and also a really cool robotics side project would be really good for your application.
Brilliant. That sounds like a really good idea. Perhaps developing on that a bit more. What got you interested into mechanical engineering in the first place? How do you discover this passion?
That's a good question. Um, I got interested in mechanical engineering because it was cars that got me started. I have always really liked cars and just moving things in general, planes, and and just everything. Anything you think of moving is involved in mechanical engineering. And f- if you think about mechanical engineering, it's basically if you look at your phone, if you look at any devices, it's the hardware. So, for example, for your iPhone, it's your touchscreen, the speaker, the camera system, the packaging, and even like the structure of your iPhone is basically mechanical engineering. So I really like how the degree is so broad and we learn a lot of things during our degree that equips us with the ability to um, be in different workforce. For example, we learn electrical stuff, we learn chemical stuff, um, and even though the majority of our courses are mechanical, um, we have a lot of like merging between electromechanical and mechanical. So like we get to do a lot of like tech stuff as well. So I really like how mechanical engineering is like really broad and allows me to explore different fields of engineering.
That's a very brilliant presentation about what got you interested in. I mean, I think one of the most interesting parts about all these interviews is to figure out how different people discover their passions. Because a lot of times, I think one of the biggest challenges for people applying to universities is not necessarily how to get good at something, because that's kind of quite self-explanatory after you understand what you like. But discovering that passion is so important. And thank you for sharing your experience with us. Perhaps going beyond your own backstory, what are some of the things which you think stood out in your application when you were applying to the University of Waterloo? What were perhaps 3 to 5 different ideas which really helped your application stand out for such a competitive university?
So the first aspect that helped me was my internship because a lot of people don't have engineering internships at high school because these are really technical fields and companies would normally prefer tertiary education students than high school students because they have no professional experience whatsoever. So I was lucky because I had a family friend who could get me like a slightly easier way in. My second aspect was the essays that I wrote for the application portal. So me and Josh and my high school consultant, we spent a lot of time on the essays to make it as good as I can present myself as. I would say the third project is that my personal project that I included in my application was that my device that sanitizes the flush toilet flush was quite impactful in terms of um, like for my family, for example, because that time was like COVID and everyone's like being extra careful. So the fact that I was able to relate current world problems into my project and potentially creating a solution, I think that's what they like about it. So yeah, the three of them was like first my internship, secondly my application essays, and third is my personal projects.
Brilliant. That's a very good tips or insight into how you can decide or think about making your application stand out. Now, talking about making your application stand out, if you're enjoying this interview so far and want more interviews like these, then make sure to like and subscribe to this YouTube channel and let me know in the comments what other subjects or universities do you want to hear from, and I'll try to make those interviews possible for you. Also, if you're applying to the UK and the US, go check out our 2 books, the UCAS Bible and the US College Guide. Links to them would be in the description below. They're accessible via PDF, Kindle, and paperback. So make sure, no matter what way you like digesting your information, you definitely can go check them out in the link below. So let's carry on with this interview and talk a bit more about your application. So, of course, there are things which you think you've done very well in your application, but there's also things on reflection which you perhaps could think, well, perhaps I could have done a bit better on a few of these things. If you could go back and tell yourself, well, okay, I could improve my application in these ways, how would you have done better in your application?
I think one of the ways that I could make my application better is to have, for example, like I have mentioned before, it's the projects that I've done because, for example, there's a software in mechanical engineering or engineering in general is really widely used. It's called AutoCAD or SolidWorks. A lot of my friends who are my classmates nowadays, they already have some really good experience in the softwares because they were making robots themselves. They were using these softwares to 3D print to make their own devices and everything. But me, I had never used these devices before, and so when I got in, I was like, "Whoa! All these people know what they're doing, and I'm just working on my toy project like a fourth grader." So in comparison to what they were doing at that time, so I would say that I wish I spent more time working on like these designing on these projects and stuff when I was high school because being in Harrow, I think a lot of people emphasize on like academics and grades, but in terms of like a STEM field, no one at that time really um, put heavy emphasis on like working on side projects and everything. So I think they're realizing it now and they have like a robotics team and everything, but at that time they didn't really have that. So that's one of the regrets I had.
That's a very brilliant insight. And I think it's so important to kind of think about not only how you've done well, but also try to learn from perhaps how someone can do a bit better. Now, developing upon that, in the same theme of that question, what did you find was the hardest thing applying to Canada and applying to mechanical engineering at Waterloo, and how were some ways in which you've overcome those challenges?
I would say the hardest part is probably the interviews because I've at that time I wouldn't say I'm the most confident in my interviews. So and for the written parts, it's always I would say it's like the not I wouldn't say it's the hardest because we're provided like a long time to write our essays, and as long as we finish it within the time frame, everything should be okay because we get to take our time and everything. But for the interview, um, everything is like there's only one try, you can't do it again, and just I've been like not too confident in my interviews, so I overcame it by just like talking to people, calling some advisors that I have to um, ask them about what they think about my interview, and maybe even talking to Josh and practicing my interviews and everything. So I think just practice in terms of interviews, practice is really important.
Thank you for sharing your advice on how to do well in an interview and how that might have become quite challenging at the start. So, apart from interviews, what were some other parts of the application system for University of Waterloo?
Well, the application process was just submitting your grades, um, your the questions they have for you, so like the essays, and also the video interviews.
Brilliant. So perhaps you've already talked a bit about the interviews and the grades. Can you tell us a bit more about some things which you can do in your essays which would make you stand out?
So the essays they have they're basically like the U.S. essays. So it's basically like a few questions that are like capped at like 200 words and maybe like a few two longer ones at 300 or 400 words. So I think since that they have a word limit for the essays, it's really important to not waste any word counts and um, just get straight to the point and put as much content there is as you could. But in the meantime, having a good coherency. Um, but it's really important to show them your passion for engineering
Hmm.
and the fact that it's also important to let them know that you acknowledge their placement program. So, because at Waterloo, for example, the placement program is compulsory. So everyone who goes into engineering has to do this placement program. So it's really beneficial for you to have that in your essays or in your interview, so you know that so the unis know that you know about the course and you're
Hmm.
actually interested in doing internships all around the world.
That's brilliant. So it's very interesting to hear about this placement program, and we will be talking more about your placement program in our next video where we talk a bit more about life at the University of Waterloo. So to end off this video, if you could go back in time, or you're perhaps talking to a student who is thinking about applying to mechanical engineering in Canada or the University of Waterloo, what would be a few pieces of advice that you would give them to help them in their application?
I believe the advice that I'm going to give is suitable for anyone who wants to do engineering in general, not just Canada, but even US and UK. So the first tip I would give is obviously to have really good grades, because if you look at the admission average for Canada, UK, and US, they're all really high, and all the people applying there are, I would say, they're really good at maths and science and everything. So having good grades is really important. Second of all, I think a really good bunch of extracurricular activities is really important as well, because there are already so many people with good grades, and that has become a basic requirement. And in order for you to stand out amongst so many people, you need some projects and past experience to make yourself more competitive. The third tip I would give is if there are any interviews, you should be really passionate. Show your passion for engineering, and be able to demonstrate that what you got. Because in engineering, it's especially important because, for example, if you design a device, you should have some really good communication skills to propose it to your manager or propose it to your investors. So these are some things that the unis are looking for, because that's why they have interviews to make sure that everyone um, who's applying there, who's getting in, are able to communicate with people properly.
Thank you very much for sharing these 3 tips. Thank you very much for coming onto this channel. I'm sure the viewers have learned a lot. If you've enjoyed this interview and have any questions, let me know in the comments below, and I'll try to get answers for them there. Also, if you enjoy this interview and want more videos like these, make sure to like and subscribe. It really means a lot to me, and it really helps us provide accessible and affordable college consulting services to the world.